I don't think as a business owner, I've ever had a relaxing day in my life. Incredible stress every day, and I drink a lot of Celsius, which is probably going to be the end of me, and that's how I function.
How did you guys run demand gen business back in 90s, 2000?
In some ways, there's less competition now than there was back then. Email changed the universe. It just did. It started when I was very young, and I became fascinated as I was growing up by this idea of measurable media, that you could spend $1 on marketing and you could make $2.
I wanted us to spend a few minutes talking about the company culture you've been building at Outcome Media.
I am a micromanager. I'm totally aware of that. I haven't had somebody quit working for me in, I think, 3 years, which is cool. You have to just kind of really feel who people are and help them to find what they're passionate about or what they could be really good at.
And then I wanted to talk business with you because you didn't do a bunch of those interviews about business.
So a couple years ago, I did this first conference called Guru Conference. And the idea, which everyone told me was the worst idea ever, was to make the largest virtual conference I could. And I would say 100% of the advice I got was telling me, don't do it. You're an idiot. This will fail. This is a horrible idea. The best thing I did was listen to nobody. In your gut, if you think something's worth it, you got to try it.
First off, Jay, preparing to our interview was one of the most interesting for me and the funniest one because I've looked through 10 months of your LinkedIn posts and there was 90% of memes. And I love that. I was basically laughing my ass out for like 1 hour and a half here in the office. And I probably shared about 30, 40 marketing memes with the team. They started their morning with memes. So I appreciate you for that. That was a nice preparation for the interview. But like all jokes aside, we're not going to be talking memes, of course, today.
Right. That's hilarious. I'm so sorry you had to spend your time doing that, but thanks for checking
I love that. I think it's if every guest would have a bunch of memes, then it's going to be much funnier to prepare. No, all joke aside, I know you've done a lot of really cool interviews talking about email marketing, subject lines. Yeah. So what I want today is I want to take everything of that aside, and then I wanted to talk business with you because you didn't do a bunch of those interviews about business. And this is something that I would really wanted to tap into, considering your experience, but also considering the sort of like the group that you are building, because I'm sort of like a few steps behind you, but I have the same vision. So I have built Belkins Group, which is a appointment setting demand gen agency, and we branching out other companies that are complementary. And I love what you did with Outcome Media, with Guru Events, with Subject Line, now Decision Market Publishing. So kind of combining that in the World Data Group. So I wanted to chat World Data Group. I wanted to chat Outcome Media. I wanted to chat something about the Subject Line and Guru Conference, but kind of package that in the business type, entrepreneurship, rather than pure marketing, if that's fine with you. Yeah?
Yeah, whatever. I'm game. Yeah, sounds like fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, so first off, how did you come up with the group vision? And tell me more about the group and what's the vision of the group and how did you initially come up with it? Because many people ask me, Michael, how do you come up with Belkins group vision? I was like, you know what? I actually didn't. I just went with the flow and it became clearer and clearer as we go, right? Or as we went. So tell me your story.
It started when I was very young, when I was like 5 years old, because my folks, I lived in Long Island, New York. My mom was a school teacher. My dad worked for a magazine. Our house was real small, and they didn't like their jobs. And so this is back in the 70s. So they took all the money they had in the world and they bought a computer, which back then was like wild. They would take the yellow pages and they were typing every address that they could find in the yellow pages into a list. And they started this business in our garage where they were trying to sell this list that they were creating for people to run direct mail campaigns. And I became fascinated as I was growing up because this was the business I was surrounded by this idea of measurable media, that you could spend $1 on marketing and you could make $2. And when I was in college, the internet was just getting going in the 90s, early 90s. It was just starting out, which now seems ridiculous. And while I was in college, I really got fascinated with the idea of maybe there could be internet advertising. And I started back then what was one of the first few internet advertising companies that existed. There was no Nothing. I mean, this was predating every internet advertising company you could think of. And this company Web Connect was born, and it did okay. But then Google and Yahoo and some of these other companies started to dominate it. And I was like, you know what? I got to pivot this thing because I'm going to be out of business real fast because I was not moving fast enough. And so I pivoted to this idea of having an agency that could focus on not just internet advertising, but email, which was really starting to get really popular. And so you fast forward, I was able to build out this agency, which used to be called World Data. It's now called Outcome Media. We're about 100-person organization. That business is about 100-person organization. And it's a demand generation agency for business and consumer marketers that now does email, direct mail, podcast advertising, all of this stuff. And then I've been doing that for the last 20 or so years. And then coming out of that, and I'm happy to share how I wound up doing all this other stuff. I've started other businesses because things have grown out of that business. But really, it all gets down to I love the idea of being able to measure things and be able to measure outcomes. And that's a passion of mine.
For someone that was born in early 90s, I have no idea how did you guys run demand gen business back in 90s, 2000. Like, honestly, I don't know anything about the demand gen until after the sales force started doing the predictable revenue and sort of like pushing out. So can you take me back to the early 90s and your demand gen early 90s days, how they were different from then the next decade and then the next decade? What were the rules and how the rules changed? What were the sort of like the high peaks of the approaches that worked really well in that period of time?
Well, it's funny. Early back in the mid 90s when I had my internet advertising business, internet advertising basically didn't exist. And so what we would do is we would convince an advertiser, you should advertise on the World Wide Web. And they go, okay. And then what we would do is I would literally have to make phone calls to people that had websites. I would find people that had a website and I would call them and say, I want to put an ad on your website. They go, what does that mean? I go, it's a link on your website. I'm going to pay you like $50 for the month if I could put an ad on your website. And I would make hundreds and hundreds of phone calls trying to convince people that they should put an ad on their website because they never heard of this ridiculous idea of having of a link on their website that goes somewhere else. And so back then, demand gen was really everything was calling people. But it's funny now, how many calls, not on your cell phone, I don't even have a work phone anymore, but how many calls do people actually pick up on a work phone that aren't scheduled? Like you don't have a meeting invite or some kind. It's like zero, right? But back then, your phone would just ring all day from solicitations and all. So that's what it was. Demand gen was all about calling people, and now it's all about these meeting invites and like what Chili Piper has done. My meeting link is like the most important thing I have. Right? It's crazy. I mean, better than anybody about getting appointments and meetings. It's a different world.
All right. So you have calling 90s from the top of your head. Like, what was the first big event that happened that changed the game? That you said like, okay, calling is okay, but something new came up. What was that?
Well, it was definitely email. Email really changed the universe. It just did. Back early on, there was no structure to email. I mean, Gmail didn't exist. Email was wild. It was trying to find out even who had an email address, because now it's like everybody, it's ridiculous. Everybody has an email address, but it was getting a hold of people's who has an email address and whoever they were checking their email like they couldn't wait to check their email because they weren't getting a lot of it. Right. So email, when it came on the scene, it was like unbelievable how quick people responded, how much they interacted. They thought it was fun, So now it's a whole different animal with email. But once email really came on the scene, everything changed.
Most entrepreneurs I talk to, they say that the early years are hell because especially now when you're starting business in 2020, 2023, a lot of competition, as you said, like a lot of data out there, a lot of sort of like comparisons. So you cannot just pick up the phone and call someone. It's more complicated, more comprehensive. Again, I saw you Outcome Media 1995, 2005, the first 10 years. I have the feeling that sort of like you were this young entrepreneur, owner of the advertising agency. Competition wasn't that tough. Margins must be very nice. So I'm imagining this cabriolet type of car,
Oh yeah.
just like Florida, just going out there,
Oh yeah.
meeting people. Was that
Oh yeah.
like or not?
No, no, I wish it was like that. I don't think as a business owner, I've ever had a relaxing day in my life. It's so sad. No, in some ways, there's less competition now than there was back then. And the reason I say that is there was very specific marketing channels, right? There wasn't that many of them. There was no social media. There was no search engine marketing. There was just there was a few channels. There was like direct mail. There was email. There was telemarketing. Maybe if you were doing branding, there wasn't a lot of them. And because there wasn't a lot of them, anybody who was doing marketing services were in those channels. And so they were flooded. And basically, everybody was doing the same stuff. You didn't really have a lot of unique selling propositions that you were offering because we're all doing the same stuff. So you fast forward to now, I mean, if you have 15 phone calls in a day, everybody's doing something different. It's just like, what do you do? I don't even understand. Now with AI, I can't even understand half the calls. I'm like, what exactly do you do for a living? And so I don't even know who really competes with somebody else, right? So like, does HubSpot really compete with Salesforce Marketing Cloud? Because, are they really doing the same thing? Is this one really competing with that one? Because they're doing so many different, everybody's doing so much different stuff. So I think now, oddly, you have the ability to be more unique in the marketplace than it used to be. But in general, there's never been a point in my life where I'm like, oh, I'm so relaxed and it's so wonderful. I feel incredible stress every day, and I drink a lot of Celsius, which is probably going to be the end of me, and that's how I function.
A lot of deals have been made during the handshake, meeting clients in the office, getting them to restaurant. Yeah. Was it like that?
It's actually a good question. I used to have to do a lot more of these dinners, right? Everybody wants to go to dinner. We'd have to do a lot more wining and dining. We would take trade show booths at a million different conferences, and our travel and leisure that we would spend on would be ridiculous. Our clients used to expect us to visit them all the time. On a quarterly basis, we had to go visit every client that we had. And now people don't even want to see you. They're like, we're not in office. We don't want to come into town to see you. It's okay. You don't need to come visit us. I don't need to have the big dinner. I think that's also been a big shift, at least from what I've seen, in terms of how you interact with your vendors and your customers and all this stuff. There's a missing human element. And I think it's been since COVID. Like if I have a client, a big enterprise client, and they're in, Chicago, I say, we're going to come to Chicago. We're going to see you all. And they're like, well, a lot of us work remotely, so we're not in the office that day. And then we all have to come in. We don't want to do that. Nobody wants to do it. So deals used to get done, handshake on a golf course, at a dinner. Nobody wants to see each other anymore.
So you started Outcome Media first, and then 5-10 years passed, and then the second project in the group was subjectline.com, right?
Yeah. So what happened was, I have this agency, right? It's doing well, doing all this stuff. And email at the time was really exploding, like 15 years ago or so. And all of our clients would come to us and say, hey, what subject line should we use? And it was all my account executives were like, what should we tell them? I'm like, we got to build a tool. I mean, this is crazy. We need something. So I was literally sitting on my couch. I went on GoDaddy or whatever it was at the time, and I registered subjectline.com because 15 years ago, there were a lot of domains available. And we put up this tool, a free tool, where people were able to go to this website, put in their subject line, and my team was able to use it, and we give them a score if it was good or bad and all this stuff. And I was surprised. Subjectline.com just started taking off and getting really popular. And so we turned it into a site for everybody. And today we've checked over 15 million subject lines on that site. It's powered by AI, and it's free and it's fun. But it really gave us this kind of launch pad into the world of email marketing. And it helped to give my agency more of a cachet. But that subjectline.com, people started to know me more as the subject line guy than they did even for my agency. And we had all this community that built up around it of email marketers. And so a few years ago, I said, there's got to be more that we could do with this community of email marketers that we've kind of built. And so I started up this other company called Guru Media Hub. And the idea there was I was really annoyed coming out of COVID that virtual conferences and virtual events got stained. Everyone's like, virtual events suck. Nobody wants to go to these things. They're terrible. And I was like, I just think we're looking at these the wrong way. Virtual events are so powerful that we could all be together without being together. So I said, I'm going to start up this business that puts on really large scale virtual conferences. And the first one I'm going to do is about email marketing, because I already had this community from subjectline.com. So a couple of years ago, I did this first conference called Guru Conference. And the idea, which everyone told me was the worst idea ever, was to make the largest virtual conference I could. It was going to be 2 days. It was going to be all about email marketing. It was going to be totally free. You couldn't pay for anything. Year one, we had 13,000 people that came, and it was super fun. And year two, which we just had this past year, we had over 20,000 people. We had Martha Stewart, and we made it fun. We had TikTok dancers and chicken wing contests and all this chaos. We had a live DJ. And so I doubled down on that business, and now we do other events. We launched a podcast network, and it's become a full-blown media company, really all growing out of this idea of subjectline.com. And now we don't just do email stuff. Now we do all sorts of different marketing channels. But, it's all about just trying to build on momentum wherever you see it. And that's been really exciting.
Did you structure these three companies? So just let me quickly recap. So you have Outcome Media as a demand gen company. You fuel the growth of that company by creating this free platform that was used by 15 million. You have 15 million subject lines, and it's also free. And it helps you to generate the community that then you combine into in the Guru Hub Media that you do. And then, all right. So did you structure these three companies separately, or it's one company?
So I have two separate companies now. So Outcome Media is one company. That's my agency. And then the other company is Guru Media Hub, separate company. And subjectline.com is now part of Guru Media Hub. And we separated them out completely. Guru Media Hub can have its own identity. Right. And Outcome Media has its own identity. And the hard part for me is I have no identity. I'm all, like everybody else. I'm all over the place, and I don't know what's going on. Trying to figure that all out. And so, so it's two separate entities.
Are you operationally involved in each entity and as well as subject line on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I'm totally out of control. And this is not necessarily something I recommend to everybody, but I am a micromanager. I'm totally aware of that.
Control freak.
I don't have any investors. I don't take on any investors. I don't give up any equity. I just like being in control, which is a terrible thing to say because it makes it very, very hard to scale a business. But I'm also very well aware of that. And what I'm very comfortable with is being able to decide, make decisions, and move fast. What I'm uncomfortable with is having other people tell me you can do this or you can't do this, or I have to answer this person, or I have to have this report and this group or whatever. So it limits my growth, but it also lets me feel good when I go to bed at night.
You are not alone in this. I didn't raise capital. We are down to 300 people right now, have a bunch of company spin-offs, all complementary. No VC, me and a partner are the owners, and not share equity. We do profit sharing with a lot of folks, which is great. And I think like you and I, we have the best business model that are ready for 2024. When other companies are burning out cash and just looking for raising capital, we're good, right? And we just keep building stuff and growing. I love that. How did you structure companies to run them efficiently? Do you have C-level per company or like CEOs per project? Or how does it work from the managerial standpoint?
Well, I run both companies. And then we have layers of, vice presidents, directors, things of that nature. I will tell you, in the last few years, I've really gotten away from hiring more employees, and we're doing a lot more of contractors. A lot more. I took my company remote. I have a building here, but I took my company's remote during COVID, and we stayed remote. Nobody wanted to come back. And then ever since we stayed remote, I got incredibly comfortable with just not needing to be around people, so to speak. And it allowed this idea of us hiring contractors and onboarding them really fast. I've always felt frustrated because parts of my business, there's an ebb and a flow. There's certain points that are really busy and other points that are not. And sometimes I would have staff and I would always be like, are they working as hard as I need them to work? Do they really have a full day's job in whatever it is that they're doing? And so I've migrated a lot more to contractors where I could kind of turn the dial up and down on any given thing that we're working on. It's a lot easier to not continue with a contractor than it is with a full-time employee. And I'm enjoying that way more than I ever thought I would. So it's something that I wish I would have done earlier on, quite frankly.
What's the difference now? All right. Like if they are great, passionate people that are dedicated and are providing quality and a good service to a client, then what's the difference whether they are a W-2 or W-9, right?
I agree with you.
There's no difference.
Yeah, the difference is I don't have to pay for health insurance.
Yeah. You know what we measured? We measured sort of like in our financial planning, if you have certain revenue that you make per client or whatever, and then if you have a contractor versus the full-time employee with with overhead, basically with contractors you don't have a bench, right? Because you probably it's like time and material type of engagement. Like you pay them for the work that they're doing, and because there's not a lot of overhead involved, the margins are like 2 or 3 times higher without them. Yes. But efficiency is the same, and people are as happy, right? Yeah. There's a lot of like things that you can just remove. And what we also start doing is that we can reimburse the healthcare premiums to people. It's like a perk that you can give and reimburse and stuff, but you don't need to have the entire plan for the entire company for whatever that. So I agree with you. This is much more flexible, type of engagement. And
totally agree.
How much money did you put into Guru Media Hub to kick this off? Was there like a substantial amount doing that? And again, the reason I'm asking is I'm one of those people that didn't raise capital, decided to start their own SaaS company. Last year, I put $750,000 to sort of like to balance out the marketing and engineering and R&D spend, and then I was like, shit, we have had to raise that because there's no way I can build a top line SaaS product, in email readability space without the cash. But now I understand that. So did you guys make the same mistakes that I did, or you've been smarter and you didn't put a lot of cash in?
I don't know that I'm smarter at all, because it seems like you're doing just fine, and you might have the secret sauce. I'll tell you, when I started Guru Media Hub, what I did was I did not put in $1. What happened was I was like, okay, the first step in Guru Media Hub is we're going to put on this really large conference, this virtual conference for free. So I went on LinkedIn and I did one post. Literally, I wrote, I'm announcing something. I'm putting on a virtual conference, and I called it, this is going to be the world's largest virtual email marketing event, with absolutely no right for me to say that at all. And I go, it's going to be incredible. And I wrote this whole post. And I said, and if you want to be on the early sign up list that didn't even exist yet, go here and put your email address in. And I'm like, if a lot of people put their email address in, cool. I'll go out to people and get them to sponsor. So we had in 24 hours, we had a couple thousand people do it. I was like, holy crap. And then I turned around and said, I reached out to some people I knew at different companies and said, would you sponsor this thing? And people jumped on board. And thankfully, Guru Media Hub was making money from day one. Now, I know that's not normal. The reality of it is, and this is what I think I would recommend to anybody who's interested in starting any business, you need to invest in your personal brand. As uncomfortable as it may be, in my regular world, I don't post on Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff, but in my business world, I post a lot on LinkedIn. By having a big network, I can announce whatever I want, and people will DM me and say, oh, what are you doing? What's going on? We should talk. But without that network, it's very hard to do that. So I encourage anybody, even if you're not ready to start a business, even if you don't have your idea yet or whatever you're going to do, start building your network massively now, because when you are ready, you'll have people to tell about it.
Yeah. I love what Chili Piper, Apollo, Gong are doing with their employees, with their team. Like they're building brands of each account executive, sales exec, marketing, everyone. Having a solid audience would definitely help them with their career. And this is just they're in different league now with like having that 100%. Followership, right? And they always will have projects. They always will be in high demand.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. So besides this, what are the other tips that from you for someone like me who is also building a group and as well as like complementary projects? Any tips, any mistakes you've made, like kind of penciling this group out into what it is right now over these years?
Yeah, well, the first thing that we did was I had no idea. I went and I reached out to a lot of people I knew in the industry for this Guru Media Hub business, especially the first virtual conference we did. And first I asked people advice. What do you think about putting on a virtual event? The revenue business model is going to be all sponsorship driven, all this stuff. And I would say 100% of the advice I got was telling me, don't do it. You're an idiot. This will fail. This is a horrible idea. And the best thing I did was listen to nobody, because in your gut, if you think something's worth it, you got to try it. And so that was step number one. But step number two was, before I committed any budget towards this thing and any budget towards people, what I sent out a note to my whole company, my agency, and I said, I'm starting up this other thing over here, Guru Media Hub. And here's what it is. I go, this thing's going to take up a lot of time. It's probably going to be stressful, but you might learn a lot. It could be a lot of fun. And I'm not going to pay you any more money to be involved. Does anybody here want to get involved? And I was shocked. So many people in my agency were like, they raise their hand. They go, I'm all in. I love to be a part of that. It taught me that just letting people in on what you're doing, people want to be a part of growing something, experiencing something. While it's your ride that you're trying to start something, other people really get excited. And it's not just about money. You know, they get excited about being a part of building something. And so that worked out really well for our ability to get this thing off the ground. And even asking people like in the industry, people were like helping us out without me giving them $1, because they just wanted to be a part of something that was growing. So
do you think having the right people in Outcome Media allowed you to take the jump? And then what kind of people were there? And the reason I'm asking you this, because, and we will talk about that in a second for the listeners, I saw on LinkedIn stats that you have a employee tenure at 10 years. So people stay long working with you.
Right.
And I love that. This is something that I wanted to achieve. This is the metric that I'm always looking for. So the point when you decided, hey, all right, we wanted to branch out, we wanted to do Guru Hub Media, I can do that, I have volunteers, I have the people. Was it like your team was at the place where you know that there were people that were like proactive, eager? What was that sort of like the jump that you make people-wise? So to understand what sort of people you need to have around you to be able to actually successfully spin off and launch a project that can be successful with the people behind you doing that.
No, that's a great question. And I appreciate you calling that out, because I really do take pride in the fact that my team has stuck together for a really long time. I haven't had somebody quit working for me in, I think, 3 years, which is cool. If we put out a job ad to hire somebody, and it's about, let's say a marketing manager, and then we interview the person and we're like, this person is clueless about marketing, but they're really smart. They're whatever. Maybe they should be helping us with our HR. I believe in the person, not necessarily that they are in this one bucket, that they do this, this one thing. So I'll give you an example, like our podcast network. I didn't hire somebody that knows about podcasting at all. So I reached out to my team, everybody in my agency. I go, who here loves podcasts? Anybody here just consume And somebody was like, oh my God, I love podcasts. I love everything about podcasts. The greatest thing of all time. And I was like, well, and she's incredible. She really is super bright. I'm like, what do you think about leading this podcast network since you have a passion for it? She's like, of course. I'm like, that's great. And she has zero background in it. But you know what? If you could find people that you think are smart, that have a passion for anything. I mean, we had somebody that was on my sales team, and they were a terrible salesperson. I mean, they couldn't sell anything. But every time we were in a meeting and marketing stuff came up, this person would give out ideas that were great. They were great. And I'm like, so I pulled her off to the side. I'm like, you're like one of the worst salespeople I've ever met. Ever. I go, but I think you could be great at marketing. And she's like, but I've never done marketing. I go, I think you could do it. And since now she runs our marketing department. And I think that's what the secret is like, you have to just kind of really feel who people are and help them to find what they're passionate about or what they could be really good at.
I wanted us to spend a few minutes talking about the company culture you've been building at Outcome Media. Obviously I've mentioned this already, highlighted the fact that you guys have very high tenure, 10 years plus. You've been working with people. You've mentioned that there was several years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, when the last person voluntarily left the
Right.
company, right?
Right.
So can you describe for me what is the DNA of the outcome media from company culture standpoint, and what is that you guys do to nurture the talent to the point where they're like sticking around for a long? Like, are there any specific compensation structure that you have that allow them to enable them to be in the company, or what stands behind people, spending 10 plus year in your organization?
It's a great question. And I don't think that I don't follow some sort of normal book like you should do it this way. I'll tell you what has worked for me. Early on in my career, we had commissioned salespeople. They're on my team. And they would, they would be very aggressive closing deals. But things would happen where people would start to argue, well, that was my account and this is my account. I should be getting this commission. I should be getting that commission and all this stuff. And I felt this kind of like toxic environment. And so I decided I wanted nobody on my team to be on commission at all, period, end of story. And I decided for the way that we go to market and sell, I didn't want to have salespeople. I wanted nobody that identified it as a salesperson. And I said, I wanted to kind of rebuild how we bring on business to be more about people referring us, being introduced by, happy clients, and remove kind of this sales culture. Ever since I did that, the overall culture of the company got stronger. And I know that this is not the norm. Everybody has salespeople and BDRs and SDRs and, all this structure and all this stuff. But I found we probably left money on the table. We've probably left a lot of potential business on the table by doing it this way. But overall, I think our team feels more like a team. Like, we are collaborative in trying to close a deal. We're collaborative in trying to make sure our client is happy ongoing. Everything is collaborative because you're not making more or less money because the deal closes. And if we win, then everybody wins. Everyone's going to make some more money. Everyone's going to do well. And that has been kind of a secret sauce for us. And then the other thing was coming out of COVID, we have these 2 offices here in South Florida. Everyone used to come into work. We went fully remote. And then when coming out of COVID, I was like, all right, are we going to move back to the offices, whatever? And I literally took a survey of the company. I said, who wants to come back? Who's willing to come back? And everyone said they would prefer not to come back. And I said, all right, you don't want to come back? Great. So I leased out all my space. I left a few thousand square feet for anybody that wanted to come in whenever they wanted to come in. But we said, we're staying flexible forever with no requirement to come in. And I think that's also been a huge help. So those are kind of the 2 major cultural things I think that we do.
Who are the main HR people in the organization? You have a strong HR team doing that with like processes, or the team leaders or head of the departments are playing those roles, or it's like a vertical from top to bottom? Like if you were to sort of like identify the key HR people that are building the culture, who they are?
Yeah, we have an HR team. They're really there more as a function. This is not to belittle them. They do a very good job, but they're there more for benefits management, for organizing, time off, all of the basic stuff. The culture is really at a department level where our, account team leaders, they have an overall group leader, our marketing team, our accounting team, they all have leadership, and we're constantly meeting. So I meet with our account team leaders every single day. We have a standing Zoom every morning, no matter what, no matter where we are. It's carved off on everybody's calendar. And we all do a check-in on all the accounts that we're working on, the priorities for the day. I have a standing weekly call with every department in the company, no matter what. Ironically, we see each other more now, because of Zoom than we did even when we were in the office together. I know this probably isn't a good thing or whatever, I never know, but I have an always on policy in terms of camera. I don't like this. I won't be on camera. I don't play that because you got to see each other. So we have an always on policy for our teams internally, and stuff like that. I think small stuff, it matters. So that's what we try to do.
How do you make people show up for calls with regards to, like all of people are working remotely these days, and the way usually people are scheduled is like the working hours are a bit different. I can take 1 hour off to go somewhere, take my kids to school, whatever, and then go back. I can drive, take meetings, whatever. Like, how do you keep people in check with regards to showing up, do you have any process inside to that, or it's like just the the motivation, or it's just the the kind of people you bring on?
Yeah, well, first off, we do operate 9 to 5. I mean, I operate way earlier and way later, but we operate 9 to 5. Those are our hours, and you are expected to, be available, be on, all of that. If you're going to take, your kids to do this, you're going to be late. It's fine. We're super flexible, but you have to let that be known so that way everybody knows you're not available. So unless you said I'm not available, then you are available.
Yeah,
I think that ever since COVID, everyone feels very strong about feeling fortunate that they have the ability to stay remote. And I think that in a weird way, I think that companies that arbitrarily say, okay, we're going to be in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and it's weird and it feels arbitrary, I think it crushes culture.
right.
I think it hurts the environment. And I think that people that have an always flexible environment like we do, it's a massive benefit now, right? It's a competitive advantage to bringing people on to be super flexible. And we try to always keep that front of mind.
Yeah. All right. I have a tricky question that I would love to, curious to hear your thoughts on. You mentioned that, and you confirmed this just right now, that you don't have a sales force inside, that you're not pushing for growth. Sometimes there will be some business laying off the table and you don't work with because of that. And last time we spoke, you also said that you kind of went to the point where it's a more, not, I wouldn't say like a boutique approach, but rather like you scale with a reasonable speed, right? You're not pushing for scale and so on and so forth.
Correct.
So, you're between 50 to 200 people organization, like 100, 150 people organization. So, but then people stay in the company for a long period of time, and knowing people and knowing the motivation of people, they're always looking for growth. Like, hey, I want to make more next year. I wanted to go and have that new position. I need more, I need more and more. So what helped me a lot to retain the talent was I always introduced for them something new every year, every few years, to be able to retain them. But now, knowing that you didn't go for the growth and you still retain the talent, what is that new that you introduce to them every time for them to kind of stay on?
Well, first off, I mean, look, money's always a motivator. Clearly, everybody wants to make more money. So longevity and loyalty and doing a great job, people get paid, right? So that's big. In the world that we're in the marketing services business. We're in this media business. Because it's ever evolving, 50% of our revenue is from stuff we weren't doing 5 years ago, right? And that has been an ongoing cycle for us. And we try to always be doing, new things. We're launching a podcast network. We're doing virtual conferences. We're learning about, this form of media. And I think it energizes the whole company that we're always trying to do new stuff. Right. I think a lot of times when you work at a company and like, okay, we manufacture, this pen, that's all we're going to do for the next 50 years, super boring. And that's the end of it. We just by the nature of the category we're in, it's exciting and we try to keep it exciting. So I feel like that's part of the reason people stay here. And we just try to have a good time, pretty positive. Everyone tries to, realize that this is where you spend a lot of time. So we laugh, we enjoy each other, and that's what we do. We also kick out bad clients. I mean, I have no problem if we take on a client and their culture sucks and they're toxic and they're stressing out the team and they're being unreasonable. I can't even tell you how many clients I've kicked out over the years because it's not worth it to have a client. I don't care if they're writing a big check, that are just not appreciative, that are unreasonable, that are ruining the culture of your own team. And I think that people need to be cognizant of that because a bad client can take down good people on your team. They will leave because they don't want to wake up and deal with that. And if it's not worth it to your business, you should say goodbye.
Yeah. When people ask me, how did we reduce churn in our company and how we, again, had people, sticking in around as well, I mentioned that the first thing that you implement is the qualification during your sales journey so that your sales team is not committed to bringing new revenue for the company, but rather like bringing clients that would provide the retention revenue. Sort of like the better customers you bring on, the more loyal the team is and the more happy the team is and
Yes,
the more strong the accounts are. So it's just a simple math. So
I
I
agree.
know a lot of competitors in our space that chase this top of the funnel and then just change the new revenue because they had high churn. So it's like you have high churn, you need to remake the lost revenue with the new sales, and then so you're bringing on whatever clients you can get to balance out. But then by balancing out, you're increasing the churn. So it's
Totally.
so it's like the chicken egg problem. So let's talk subjectline.com. I'm building several free tools that I wanted to use to kind of again create PR, source leads, create community. I love what you've done with subjectline.com. If you look at this from the project operational standpoint, how big is the team? How it's operational? Like what's happening? Like for me right now, it's like a directory when you kind of put stuff on there and you have some partnerships there, you promote some things, but then you have this database. So curious to learn more about how this project is operational?
So subjectline.com is a strange thing. It's part of our Guru Media Hub business. It is just this free tool that we have created, but it doesn't require a team at all. It gets updated with our algorithms and all the different types of stuff. But to your point, it really is something we put out free for the industry. It creates a lot of awareness for us. It creates a lot of engagement for us, but it's not something where we are trying to monetize at all. All it is an engine for us to get people onboarded into our universe of information and whatever. But I would recommend to anybody out there for your business to have, you can call it a lead magnet, you can call it whatever you want, but having a really useful, that's the most important thing. It has to be an incredibly useful tool for whatever industry you're in. And then I strongly encourage people to spend the money on the right domain. Make it inherently that the people would understand what the hell it is, right? So that way, when they're looking for it, they may not know Belkins, right? They may not know your business, but they may know, appointmentsetting.com. I have no idea if that exists, right?
Yeah.
And, oh yeah, I'm trying to get appointment set. And you Google it, oh, I'm going to do appointmentsetting.com. And then it has, some sort of tool that you can use. And then they get onboarded into your system. It's very hard to create a new brand, to be, okay, I'm going to make a new shoe company. I'm going to call it Nike, and everyone's going to understand that. It's much easier to, spend $10,000 on a domain that inherently people would understand. They would wind up going to it, and then they get sucked into your universe. That is a recipe for success, at least that I have found.
What are the top 2 or 3 channels that you used to promote that worked well for you over the years promoting this free platform?
Ironically, email promoting subjectline.com does really, really well. I have found LinkedIn to be the absolute best social media channel on earth to promote anything. And my new passion project is podcasting in 2 different directions. Having your own podcast. I wish I would have started that way earlier. I did not realize how powerful it was. And then going on other people's podcasts, because 2 things happen. Number one, you meet great people. Like we're getting to know each other because of this podcast. Maybe we wind up doing a deal together. Who knows? But then you get exposed to other people's networks, right? And you don't have to leave wherever you live. And that's really awesome. Going on other podcasts, LinkedIn and email to me are the best channels to get the word out about anything that you're doing.
Do you rank or measure subject lines by popularity? Like you mentioned, 15 million subject lines over the years. What are the top 10 best subject lines ever?
Well, what we do is we look at the tactics, the way that we fuel the data. What happens is you go to subjectline.com, you put in your subject line, and we take all the data that we have and we tell you if it's good or bad based on, we know tactics that work. Because in my agency, we send out about 6 billion emails a year, and we're constantly looking at what is working on those emails and then porting that data over to subjectline.com. So when you put your subject line in, it's going to tell you what's good or bad. And there are little things that if you put in your subject line, your email, it can radically change the number of people that open it. I'll give you some examples. If you start your subject line with a number, the 7 pitfalls to avoid this, the 4 most important blah, blah, blahs. You actually started with a number will increase your open rate dramatically. If you start your subject line with brackets, you started with brackets, you put the word, new inside of brackets, or you put webinar inside of brackets, instantly will increase, your subject line. Using an emoji will increase your open rates and your subject line performance. All of these things, little things that have a big impact that marketers or salespeople just don't always think about. That's kind of what we're always focused on.
Do you have like the most popular that people insert? Like do you guys like track sometime in the office? Like, oh, this is the most popular one people insert all the time.
Yeah, well, the most popular word is the word free. And ironically about the word free, it's also the word people are most scared of using because they think if they put the word free that they're going to go in the spam folder or the junk folder, right? But the weird part about email marketing is that it's always changing. And 10 years ago, if you put the word free in your subject line, you would get filtered. You could go to the junk folder or spam folder, but technology changed. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And by putting the word free in your subject line, it does not trigger the spam folder or junk folder. It is the absolute number one best performing word for any kind of email marketing, but it's also the word that people are most scared of because they still find stuff on the internet that tells them not to use it. So we're always looking at the most frequent words, and that's always number one.
Free. Interesting. I know that based on our research on email readability, it's not about one single word that you use. It's a combination of many words. So if you have, and you have like say 25, 50 spam words that are considered to be spam words inside one email message, then it might trigger the email goes to spam, but not a single or 2 or 3 or 5 words, because like a lot of them are currently considered to be spam. Like complimentary, for example, can be considered as spam, but it's not.
I would argue though that there's a lot of tools out there that will tell you that will say, you put all these bad words in your email, you're going to trigger spam. The truth of the matter is that 20% of all email, doesn't matter how big or small your brand is, going to go to junk or spam folder, no matter what you do.
100%.
And the reason that you go to the junk or spam folder is because of the engagement you have with your database, the technical, how often are people opening and clicking and replying and interacting with your emails? That is what's dictating whether or not you go to the junk folder, spam folder. I really take exception with all these tools that are out there that are telling people to these 10 words over here, don't use them, or too many words or this, that, or whatever, because that's really not what Outlook and Gmail and all these things are looking for. They're looking for, do people like getting your emails, period, end of story. And that's why if you go to your junk folder right now or your spam folder, you'll see big brands in your spam and junk folder, but brands that you haven't opened or clicked on in 100 years. And that's why they're in there. They're not in there because they put the word free or whatever.
Are you planning on doing Guru Conference, considering all the success that you've had in the previous years, doing it offline as well?
No, I'm not. And so Guru Conference, for those people listening, it's our large virtual email marketing event. We put on other events as well, and everything we do is virtual. And I'll tell you why I don't, for 2 reasons. I have found doing virtual conferences, the most important thing is you have to have really quality content and speakers, right? And the easiest way to get the best speakers in the world is by making it virtual and making it easy for them to attend. Once you go in person, I think your quality of speaker, number one, goes down because it's hard to get people there, right? But then number 2, we want this to be accessible for everybody around the world. And we don't want people to have to travel. And I don't want, my whole thing with my Guru Media Hub business, it is always going to be 100% free. You can't spend $1 for any of the information that we're giving. It is free. And if I went in person, just because of the sheer, in-person events are expensive. I don't care if they're big or small. You have to charge a boatload of money for them. And I ain't doing that. And I also don't like losing money. And to me, in-person events, unless they're huge, are a money loser.
You've done it 2 times or 3 times?
Well, 3 large-scale events, about 10 different virtual events. But this will be our 3rd year of Guru Conference.
How many people you expect to register and show up?
So last year we had 20,000 people register for Guru Conference. This year we're tracking towards 25,000. I don't know where it's going to wind up, but it's pretty big.
What's the percentage of registered versus the attendees? 50-50 usually?
Well, so last year it pissed off a ton of people. And what we did was I like looking at things differently, right? So I said, how do we get everybody to show up?
Right.
Because it's free. If it's free, maybe they won't show up because why would they? They have nothing invested in. I said, you know what? We're going to have no on demand. If you're not there, you can't see it. And my whole theory was let's treat a virtual conference like an in-person conference. Like if you're not there, you miss it.
Yeah.
And you have to choose which sessions you're going to. You're going to miss some stuff and there's going to be a big FOMO.
Yeah.
So we said, screw it, no on demand. And we
Yeah.
end up having over a 70% show up rate, which is huge for a conference at this scale.
Yeah.
I also probably got at least 200 emails of people that hated me, cursing at me. I'm a terrible person because there was no on demand. And I knew that was coming. I knew it was coming, but it's okay. You don't have to try to please everybody. And so that worked for us. I don't know if we're going to do it again this year. We'll see because everybody hated me, but we'll see what happens.
I've done an event last month. I call it like big roundtable of outbound leaders. I brought 6 of my friends. Everyone is industry thought leader or a specialist in one segment of the outbound, and we got everyone like 6 people, like 2.5 hours, packed, like 15 minutes presentation, open QA, just like gum. And in about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, the audience lost it, like speakers lost it. So it's like as if like there was so much information that we're like, it's done. So I was thinking like, hey, what can I do next year where it's not just 1 or 2 speakers, right? But rather like how I can pack it with a very high quality content, a lot of really great speakers, but actually people paying attention and engaging with that, and not within 1.5 hours, the attention span goes down like 50%, 200%. Like what can I change to actually people engaging, staying on? Like, what do you guys do?
For sure. Yeah. And so that's a great question. So number one, you want the sessions to be short. That's very, very important. So our sessions are 25 minutes plus 8 minutes of Q&A. So every session is no more than 33 minutes. That's number one. But then what we do is after every 2 session blocks, we do something crazy fun that has nothing to do with anything. So we did, for example, the event was about email marketing. We hired these TikTok influencers, these dancers, the Gregorian sisters, and we stopped everything and we did a live TikTok dance lesson for the whole audience. We had thousands of people learning how to do a TikTok dance. Then we had a live chicken wing challenge where a bunch of marketers ate these hot chicken wings. Then we had the cast from Love is Blind, the reality show. We hired them and they did a live Q&A with the attendees, the cast from Love is Blind. And so every so often, we did something ridiculous. Like we had my buddy Daniel Murray from the Marketing Millennials. He has a huge following on LinkedIn. They did a breakdown of memes. Like they put up 50 memes, which ones he would post or not post. And it had nothing to do with email marketing, but that's what you have to layer in. You have to realize people are human beings. And like you said, they don't have the capacity to just go all day and on this one topic. So you layer in fun stuff and that keeps them engaged. At least that's what we found.
What's the best day to do it?
Oh, so we try to do our events on Wednesday and Thursdays. Okay. That's what we found. And then the other thing you have to always be aware of. So for example, this year we have a presidential election in November, right? Yeah. You do not want to do anything. Our event is in mid-October. It normally is in November, but I'm like, you don't want to be anywhere close to that thing because it's going to be a nightmare. And you don't want to be anywhere close to anything like that. Big cultural events, big holidays, and other industry events too. You have to kind of look out for everything and try to find some block of time that works.
So you do Wednesday, Thursday, from 9 to 5 Eastern time, basically, right? That would cover.
We usually go 10 to like 4:30-ish type thing. That's what we kind of do.
Love that. All right. One last question on this. How do we pitch this to the best? Like you mentioned last time, you had some of the really smart and one of the industry leaders joining in and contributing and just participating. And again, what's your one liner, or like how especially when there was the first year event when you had it, how did you pitch this to these guys to join in?
So the first year I was full of crap. So what I did was the first year I would tell people this is going to be the biggest email event on the planet, and it's going to be massive exposure for whatever it is that you want to talk about. You got to be there. The reason I said it was full of crap is when I was pitching them, I didn't know what was going to happen. It was the first year, whatever. And then it all ended up working out. And so year 2, I spent a good amount of money making a sizzle reel with I found a really cool agency to make a sizzle reel that was like not these boring sizzle reels, but we took all the content from our event. I made this crazy sizzle reel. And we used that sizzle reel then and went and said, this was last year. It's going to be even bigger this year. And so I think spending money on a sizzle reel that's not boring like everybody else's, and using that, it drives attendees, it drives sponsors, it drives speakers. Investing in that 2-minute piece of content can literally be the launching pad to get whoever you want to participate, because it gets them excited. Like if you went on guruconference.com right now, you would see a sizzle reel that is exciting. And that has worked really well for us.
Yeah. All right, then just a quick follow-up question. How many red flags does the speaker have with you to not to fuck up their presentation? Because something that I've learned, even with the guys that I've an event with, out of 6 people, probably about 40% somehow fucked up the slides or delayed it or didn't approve it or something at your scale. Like it probably is a nightmare. Like you probably have this red flag. And you say, okay, if you don't get me 2 weeks before, then you're done.
Well, yeah, everyone has to submit all their stuff pretty early on.
Right.
And we will tell them if we think it sucks or it's too promotional. We're all for at the end of your session. You want to promote whatever you want to promote. That's great. But you can't be selling during your session. And we also, for any speaker, we are going and we are talking to people of other event organizers of where they've spoken before. And we take it, very, very seriously. The other thing that I don't do is we don't do panels. We just don't do panels where you have somebody, a moderator, and then you're asking them questions. I absolutely hate panels. I think everyone's full of crap on panels. Yeah. So really, making sure people are engaging, that's very, very, very important to us.
Yeah. My advice for everyone who is organizing any events is having someone that cares about presentations and decks and actually reading them and commenting on like, okay, this is crap. This is not like, why do we have that? Like, because and this is actually something that I've learned from when we start building our blog and readers in the articles. It's like when you have SEO specialists and content writers and the marketers and everyone collaborating, submitting the blog, it doesn't mean that actually someone reads them and cares about the blog that they post. The same goes with presentation. And as long as you have one person that will be a blogger and say, okay, no, this is bullshit. Let's really get what do you mean by this blog? Like what value does this page brings to anyone? Until you have that person, then it's going to be like an average content. But once you have that person and you pay for that, I've seen like the quality increases tremendously, right? So
absolutely. You must have somebody that cares, that has a brain, that knows what they're looking at. I would say easily 75% of the presentations that we receive ahead of time, we push back on and say, you need to change stuff. It is not like, oh yeah, it looks great, you're fine.
Love that. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time and doing part 1, part 2 with me. I appreciate you, sir. It's been really great for having me on.
Dude, you're a rock star, and Belkins is amazing, and this has been incredible. I'm a listener, I'm a fan, so thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jay.